Creo que vamos a empezar. Buenos días a los que acaban de unirse a la reunión. Muchas gracias a todos por participar en esta actividad sobre la sostenibilidad de la cadena de valor del cacao chocolate dominicano. Les recuerdo que proponemos este webinar en el marco de la primera edición del Festival del Chocolate Dominicano. Y para los que todavía no han tenido la oportunidad, les invito a visitar la página web del Festival de Chocolate. Hasta el domingo 13 de diciembre se organizan muchas actividades como visitas de fábrica de chocolate, degustaciones, talleres para aprender a cocinar con chocolate y mucho más. Así que no duden en visitar la página web. Vamos a tener en este webinar una restitución de las conclusiones del trabajo de investigación realizado por el IDRI, el Instituto de Desarrollo Sostenible de las Relaciones Internacionales, trabajo que fue apoyado por la Agencia Francesa de Desarrollo. Pues vamos a tener dos presentaciones realizadas por el señor Frédéric Amiel, que hasta muy recientemente fue investigador al IDRI y fue el que realizó el estudio en el país. Pues una primera presentación sobre la organización de la estructura y la organización y la estructura, perdón, de las cadenas de valor del cacao en la República Dominicana y en el mundo en general. Y una segunda presentación sobre las iniciativas voluntarias para promover sostenibilidad en la cadena de valor del cacao chocolate. Aprovecho la oportunidad para recordarles que las dos presentaciones del señor Frédéric Amiel van a hacerse en inglés, pero tenemos también una opción de traducción simultánea disponible para los que utilizan la aplicación Zoom. No sé si va a funcionar con la versión en línea, así que por favor pasad por la aplicación Zoom si pueden. La manera en la que funciona es que abajo de su pantalla en la derecha tienen un icono con el idioma y pueden cambiar del inglés al español. Antes de dar la palabra al señor Frédéric Amiel para su restitución de su trabajo científico, tenemos el honor de contar con la participación de su excelencia Eric Fournier, el embajador de Francia en la República Dominicana, que nos va a dar algunas palabras de introducción de este webinar. Empezamos ahora con su presentación.
Buenos días a todos. Siendo un gran amante del chocolate. Es un placer tener la oportunidad de abrir este webinar en el marco de la primera edición del Festival del Chocolate Dominicano. Nos ofrece un espacio único para discutir los resultados de casi 3 años de investigación científica sobre la cadena de valor del cacao dominicano. En este periodo de preparación de las fiestas navideñas, tan propicio para el saboreo de chocolate, parece también oportuno reflexionar sobre los impactos ambientales del consumo de chocolate y del aumento de la demanda internacional en cacao. Me complace ver una alianza entre el IDDRI, una institución francesa de investigación sobre temas de desarrollo sostenible, y la Agencia Francesa de Desarrollo, brazo operativo de la cooperación al desarrollo de Francia. Los dos se han puesto al servicio de la cadena de producción del cacao chocolate dominicano para abordar sus retos. Se ha relevado el desafío de entender cómo los actores actores a todos los niveles de la cadena, locales e internacionales, pueden contribuir al manejo de los impactos ambientales de la cultura del cacao. La cooperación entre actores de la cadena de valor aparece entonces como un elemento clave en el desarrollo de iniciativas de trazabilidad, de manejo de la biodiversidad y de certificación de calidad. La República Dominicana produce el 8% del cacao orgánico consumido a nivel internacional y un grano de cacao español mundialmente conocido por su excelente calidad gustativa. Tiene entonces todas las características para ser una tierra de experimentación y de innovación hacia una cultura del cacao más sostenible. De nuevo, quiero felicitar la iniciativa de este webinar que justamente nos ofrece la oportunidad de comer el chocolate y de intercambiar sobre el futuro de la cadena del cacao chocolate dominicano. Muchas gracias. Feliz Navidad.
Excelente. Agradecemos nuevamente Su Excelencia Eric Fournier por su amable participación y vamos ahora a escuchar algunas palabras de Sandra Casab, directora de la AFD en la República Dominicana.
Buenos días a todas y todos. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer el programa Exporta Calidad y la Cámara de Comercio Franco-Dominicana que organicen este primer festival del chocolate dominicano, por su excelente iniciativa. Como bien lo recordó el señor Eric Fournier, su excelencia el embajador de Francia, en su amable intervención, este evento nos ofrece una ocasión idónea de celebrar y probar los excelentes sabores del chocolate dominicano. Desde más de 20 años, la Agencia Francesa de Desarrollo ha apoyado la lucha contra la deforestación en la República Dominicana, la adopción de prácticas mejoradas de conservación de suelos y de agroforestería y el desarrollo de cadenas de valor agropecuarias de calidad y con fuerte valor agregado a nivel local, con el objetivo de preservar empleos en zonas rurales. Este apoyo se ha concretizado a través del proyecto Hacia, que muchos conocen, y más recientemente con el proyecto Cacao Forest de promoción de la biodiversidad en la cacaocultura dominicana. Adicionalmente, la Agencia Francesa de Desarrollo y el Instituto Francés para el Desarrollo Durable y Relaciones Internacionales, el IDRI, han llevado a cabo durante casi 3 años una investigación sobre cómo la organización del mercado del cacao, de sus cadenas de valor y sus signos de calidad conducen a soluciones y posibles dificultades. La República Dominicana, país mundialmente conocido por su cacao fino y primer país exportador de cacao orgánico, fue elegido espontáneamente para acoger el trabajo del IDRI. Con motivo de la finalización del estudio y aprovechando la organización del primer Festival de Chocolate Dominicano, se propone este webinar de intercambio basado en los resultados de esta investigación. Esta colaboración con el IDRI, que agradezco mucho por su disponibilidad, nos permite seguir más allá los intercambios con todos los actores a lo largo de la cadena de valor del cacao chocolate, para entender cómo cada uno puede contribuir al manejo de los impactos ambientales de la producción. El estudio realizado por el IDRI, objeto de este webinar, nos invita a reflexionar sobre los desafíos y las perspectivas de modernización de la cadena de producción dominicana. Como bien lo destacó el señor embajador, quisimos crear con este webinar un espacio de diálogo privilegiado entre los quienes tienen el futuro de la cadena del cacao chocolate entre sus manos. Les agradezco mucho por su interés y su participación en esta discusión sobre la sostenibilidad y el fortalecimiento de la cadena de valor del cacao chocolate. Les deseo un webinar fructífero y felices fiestas navideñas, saludables y saborosas.
Perfecto. Antes de dejar la palabra a Lidri, quiero recordarles que pueden hacer preguntas a través del icono abajo de la pantalla. Vamos a tener 2 presentaciones y entonces 2 sesiones de preguntas y respuestas después de cada una de las presentaciones. Frédéric, te dejo entonces la palabra.
Gracias. Is Stephen not speaking before?
No, cambio de plan.
Okay.
Adelante.
Good morning, everyone. First, sorry that I'm not speaking Spanish for this presentation, but I will be clearer by speaking English, and I will share some illustrations kindly translated into Castiliano by Pauline, so that you can follow. And I guess there is a translation that you can join if you want to hear the Spanish version of the presentation. So let me share the screen. So first, for the first 10 minutes, some words about the global value chain of cocoa chocolate. So we've been investigating this global chain for 3 years, with a focus on Ghana and Ivory Coast on one side, and Dominican Republic on the other side, because of the specificity of the production of organic cocoa in Dominican Republic. What I wanted to share with you first is a short reminder of the organization of the value chain of cocoa. Most of you may know about that, but good to keep in mind the various actors and players of the value chain. So at the beginning of cocoa, as most of you may know, we have a plantation, we have a tree giving cocoa fruit. Those fruit can or not be fermented. I think that the Dominican Republic is one of the country where the difference between the fermented seeds and non-fermented is the most accurate. In some countries, it will always be fermented. Then it is dried, which allows the transportation, but also the constitution of stocks and of long-standing stocks of cocoa, because the dry cocoa is less vulnerable to time and to and less likely to change its state. Then it can or not be torrefied, and then we enter the production of chocolate per se. We leave the cocoa area to enter the chocolate area. It's ground. Then you have this séance of conchage, which is the very technique which allows the development of this sweet chocolate that we all know, and that has been invented in Switzerland, where they managed to remix the cocoa powder and the cocoa butter with sugar and sometimes milk to produce this chocolate that we all know. Then it is produced as a comestible product, as chocolate bars, chocolate candies, and then it is distributed. So that's where you can find the different players of the value chain. Some of those functions may overlap, especially in Dominican Republic, which is a country where you have an overlap between the functions of the exporters and the producers, where in other countries the division is very clear. The producers will most of the time take care of the growing of the cocoa, the fermentation, and the drying, and then only it goes to the exporters, where there has been a development of a more specific role of the exporters by taking in charge the fermentation part and the drying part in Dominican Republic. Then you have the grinders. We will go back to that. The first transformers, the producers of the candy itself, and then the distributors. I'm going quickly on the production countries and directly to the production countries in green and consuming countries in blue. Clearly, it shows very well how much cocoa is a globalization product. It's a product mostly produced in the south and mostly consumed in the north, with a very unfair balance of power between the countries which gives the orders and sets the standards for cocoa, and the countries that produce the cocoa itself. Another characteristic of the cocoa value chain is this shape in bottleneck. This bottleneck, and the bottleneck is the place where the grinders sits in the value chain. So those people who take the dry seeds of cocoa and then grind it to produce cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and cocoa liquor. Four of them hold 60% of the market, which is very huge. It gives them a very big control on the whole chocolate market. Of course, the producing countries specialized in fine cocoa, in high quality cocoa, are less submitted to those four grinders, who mainly buys their cocoa in Africa, which is a very standardized cocoa that goes into very popular chocolate candies, and not to fine cocoa or fine chocolate. But even then, they are price makers in the value chain, and they are the one who controls the value chain in the end. Then you have 6 chocolate makers that makes 50% of the chocolate market. Most of them, you know them, Mondelez, Nestlé, and the other ones. Some of them are working within Dominican Republic, some less. They usually do most of their business with very standardized cocoa, and some of them, like Nestlé, may have some side products, high quality cocoa products, such as Nestlé L'Atelier, which will provide organic cocoa, guaranteed origin cocoa, but this is not the core of their business. And then you have millions of consumers of cocoa, and of course the power that those consumers holds is an actual power, but it's also a very dispersed power, and it's very difficult unless they gathered into association for them to exert a real control over the value chain. In a few minutes, the recent changes in the value chain, which are of interest, and especially the generalization of the bulk transportation. 20 years ago, newcomers in the value chain coming from the cereal business mainly Cargill, Olam, Louis Dreyfus, which are very big players of the global commodity markets, introduced within in the cocoa value chain the bulk transportation. So from bags of cocoa of a few kilograms, you go to massive tankers transporting tons of cocoa, mixed cocoa, of course. So this was really a very bad signal for the traceability of cocoa and for the segregation of specific cocoa origins or cocoa qualities, such as organic cocoa. Also, the centralization of the grinding process. In Europe, in 20 years, we went from almost 15 grinding facilities in the European Union to only 4 grinding facilities. So those 4 grinding facilities are the property of the 4 big grinders internationally. Of course, you have very small grinding machines. So the chocolate makers or some small chocolate producers will have their own grinding machines, but most of the chocolate makers will have to buy their cocoa mass, their cocoa powder, their cocoa butter to those 4 grinders. So it's a huge concentration of the value chain. And the generalization of the mass balance practice. So it's not important for organic cocoa because you cannot do mass balance with organic cocoa. You have to ensure a full traceability. But for the fair trade cocoa, for instance, it's been one of the problems. You can mix fair trade cocoa with non-fair trade cocoa into one tanker or one silo, and then you get out of your tanker as much cocoa as has entered as fair trade, and you sell it as fair trade. But in the end, the very seeds, you cannot guarantee that they were produced by a producer that participates in a fair trade program. A word about the fine cocoa, the high quality cocoa, that is one of the specialty of Dominican Republic, which is quite an exception, mainly produced in Latin American countries, but which is also endangered by the moves into the cocoa value chain. To retain most of the value of high quality cocoa, you need to segregate your transportation. And segregating your production of chocolate when you rely to those 4 big grinders, especially in Europe, is not easy. So one of the issues is to invest into medium or small grinding facilities, which is not economically viable so far. And I remember that was one of the issue raised during my inquiry in Dominican Republic, the fact that to retain more value within Dominican Republic, that would necessitate grinding into Dominican Republic, and thus investment into small or medium grinding machines or facilities in Dominican Republic, which are far too expensive compared to relying on the grinding facilities in the US or in Europe. Also, the problem with the organic cocoa, which thrived very well in the beginning of the 2000s and up to 2010. But since then, for 10 years, the price of organic cocoa tended to close up to the price of conventional cocoa. So the price difference between organic and conventional cocoa is sometimes no more interesting for the producers. So the cost associated to producing organic cocoa is too high compared to the added value of selling organic cocoa. That's a problem not only for cocoa. We find this situation in many agricultural value chains where organic production has developed those last years. and it's difficult as economists to understand why the continuing demand for organic product does not lead the prices to continue up and leaves those prices to close up more and more with the conventional price. So there is an issue, a clear issue of sustaining the organic cocoa value chain and sustaining high prices in the organic cocoa value chains. And last but not least, the very high fluctuation of the price of cocoa, of standard cocoa at the London price or the New York price are still an issue even for high quality organic cocoa such as Dominican Republic, because every big shift in the price of let's say African cocoa has an influence on the price of cocoa sold from Latin America or from the Caribbean. Here, and maybe I will stop here for the value chain because we have another presentation and I want to allow time for questions. This graph here shows in yellow the stocks of cocoa. What you can see is that the grinders, and especially the grinders in Europe and in the US, managed to constitute high stocks of cocoa over the years since the middle of the 90s, where there has been a big drop in the price of cocoa globally. This stock is those days around 40% of a global production of cocoa. So 40% of what is produced yearly in cocoa is stocked in Amsterdam or in the US in warehouses that are the property of Mars, Mondelez, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, Barry Callebaut, etc. So those companies have a very efficient way to deal with price shifts and moves in the price of cocoa, because they can wait for the price to reestablish by using their stocks. And we've seen that last year when the Ivory Coast and Ghana asked for a minimum price selling of their cocoa and stopped the exportation of cocoa for 3 or 4 weeks. That was not really an issue for those companies who could rely on their stocks, waiting for Ivory Coast and Ghana to drop their expectation on the minimum price. So there is also a challenge of relocating the stock within the producing countries to give more power to the producing countries on the whole value chain. The last slide is about the valor repartition. I think it's a global repartition, so it's probably not reflecting the situation in Dominican Republic, that is quite different. But still, what you can see is that the producer is really the one taking the short part of the value. And but I will talk about that in the next presentation. But most of the sustainable programs that are put in place now are not really in favor of raising up the proportion of the value that goes to the producers. The problem is that we don't have, except for some of the fair trade programs, we don't have sustainable programs that really allows a rising of the value taken by the producers. Thank you. I hope it was okay for the translators. Sorry for probably speaking too quickly. And now up to your questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Frédéric, por tu presentación bien clara y muy interesante. Tenemos preguntas en inglés y preguntas en español. Así que lo que voy a hacer es leer las preguntas en el idioma en el que fueron escritas, y voy a solicitar a nuestros intérpretes que por favor traduzcan al otro idioma para que todo el mundo lo pueda entender bien. Empezó entonces con preguntas en inglés de nuestros invitados. La primera pregunta, pues la leo en inglés. How much of the chocolate of the world is made mixing butter and cacao powder? I thought most is still made bean to bar, even by the big players.
Well, almost all of the chocolate is made by mixing powder with butter, or sometimes more and more you directly mix the liquor, which is the powder and the butter not divided, but you add more butter. That's what makes the chocolate we see on the market very soft. It's because there is more butter than in the original cocoa seed. That's the very process to produce the chocolate we know. The bean to bar process is more about integrating the whole aspect of the value chain. It means that you know where the bean has been produced, and you are producing the bar directly by going to the field or discussing with the producer to buy the bean, and then you make the whole transformation yourself. But even if you are a chocolate maker in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, buying your seeds directly to a farmer in Dominican Republic, in your shop, you will have to grind the cocoa seeds to extract some butter and to add more butter to your recipe than there was initially into the cocoa beans.
Thank you. I will move on to another question in English. Are there not any Asian countries among countries consuming and importing cacao and chocolate?
The Asian countries?
Sí.
Yeah. Yes, the third chocolate cocoa producer in the world is Indonesia. So Asia is well placed. It's a bit of an exception. That was one of the way for Indonesia when it gained independence from the Netherlands to build its economy, to develop in Sulawesi a production of cocoa. So there is a big production of cocoa in Indonesia, mainly grinded in Malaysia and then sold to Japan and a bit in China and India and US too. And then you have very specific production in the Pacific and especially in the Pacific Islands. You have a very high quality cocoa ground, very specific tastes of cocoa ground in the Pacific Island, but it's very small compared to the global market.
My understanding, but I'm unsure, but it still would be interesting, is that the question was more on the consumption side. Are there other Asian consumers?
Well, Japan is an historic consumer of chocolate, and especially dark fine chocolate, but also the very popular chocolate bears that you can find everywhere. China is said to be rising in consumption for the last years, but the pace is still the same for the last 10 years, as far as I know. It's not clear if they will reach a cap in the development of consumption, or if it will rise to get to the level of consumption we have in the US or Europe. That's one of the key challenges for the future of cocoa production and chocolate production. If China is to develop a consumption level as high as Europe and US, there may be an issue in sourcing, but the signal is not there very clear yet.
Okay. Vamos entonces a pasar a preguntas en español, que pues voy a leer en español directamente, que se van a traducir. Una pregunta quizás para entender mejor el contexto. Perdón, que estaba en el otro canal y se escuchaba la traducción al mismo tiempo que hablaba un poco raro, disculpa. Pues la pregunta es sobre el contexto específico para la República Dominicana. La República Dominicana representa el 80% de la producción mundial en cacao orgánico. ¿Cómo se traduce eso sobre la cadena de valor? Y en particular, la persona quiere saber si se observa una mejor trazabilidad con el cacao dominicano que en el promedio a nivel mundial.
Okay. Well, as for the traceability, clearly it's better. As I said, organic cocoa requires a full traceability. Otherwise, you cannot have the organic label. That's also why it's more expensive. So it's clearly better for the traceability, and that's also why it allowed the development of guaranteed origin cocoa in the organic market faster than in the conventional market. As for the price, the issue, as far as I understood, is that it has not been possible to develop a completely parallel market for organic cocoa. So let me explain. Most of the cocoa is sold in the London and New York commodity market for the conventional cocoa, which sets the price globally for the cocoa, the international price for cocoa. What should or may have happened is the development of a specific negotiation for organic cocoa, completely separated from the price of the conventional cocoa. But in the end, what the buyers did in Europe is that they started negotiating conventional price plus X. So that's what I explained in my next presentation. So the price for organic cocoa is still linked to the international price for standard cocoa. And that's the same for most of the fair trade programs. And the problem is that once you link your organic price to the conventional price, you cannot go too high, because the more you go far from the conventional price, the less the buyers agree to buy it. And the closer you get to the conventional price, the less the producers are keen to go to organic farming. So it leaves you in a very tiny bracket between the conventional price and more or less $300-400 more per ton, and it's very difficult for the organic price to take off unless the buyers do accept to have a specific negotiation on organic that would not be linked to the London price, which is not the case so far.
Okay. Quizás antes de pasar a la segunda presentación, una última pregunta en español muy rápida. ¿Cuál es el Farmgate Price o precio a nivel de la producción en la República Dominicana comparando con el precio internacional del commodity?
Honestly, I don't have the answer in mind. I would have to check my my notes. I have it somewhere in my computer, but I can try to find it before the end of the session.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Podemos entonces seguir con la segunda presentación y disculpas para los que no tuvieron respuestas a sus preguntas. Quizás después del webinar podemos intercambiar por correo.
Okay, so I will now give a short presentation on the sustainability practices in the cocoa value chain. So we've seen some of the issues, but almost all the players are developing strategies to go toward more sustainability into the value chain. So most of the work we've done during those years is to try to find out how much those strategies are likely to achieve more sustainability in the value chain and cocoa production, and what could be the obstacles or the issues towards sustainability. So let me share my second presentation. Here it is. Okay, for some reason, I guess you see it, but for some reason I cannot put it full screen. I hope it's still readable. No, that's the same as before. That's why. Okay. Here we are. So a brief history of sustainability initiatives in the cocoa chocolate sector. At the end of the 80s, appeared the fair trade cocoa programs with the first, and in the beginning of the 90s, 1991, the first organic cocoa in the UK, in the United Kingdom. 97, the appearance of UTS and the Rainforest Alliance, which are now the most the certification the most applied globally. In 2002, the creation of the International Cocoa Initiatives, which was an initiative to tackle the issue of child labor in the cocoa sector. And then in the beginning of the 2010s, appeared what we called the corporate initiatives, the corporate policies. So it's not an external level, it's not a regulation, it's a corporation such as Nestlé that you can see on my chronology, who decides on its own policy on sustainability. So Nestlé and Mondelez took their sustainability policies in 2012. Then in 2016, Barry Callebaut is the biggest chocolate maker globally, but they sell a very rough chocolate to other chocolate makers. So they are not very known as a brand, but almost 40% of all the cocoa produced globally goes through Barry Callebaut at one point or the other of its life. And then in 2017 appeared the Cocoa Forest Initiative, here to tackle another issue in the cocoa production scheme, which was deforestation, which gained momentum by the time. Sorry for that. And then the latest of the biggest chocolate producers globally, Mars, made its commitment towards sustainability in 2018. Here is a quote from someone here in Dominican Republic, working for one of the companies dealing with cocoa in Dominican Republic. Very interesting. And I always use this quote even when I'm not specifically speaking to a Dominican audience or about the Dominican Republic, because I think it's very it epitomizes the challenges within the cocoa value chain. What he said is that most of the sustainable programs now aims at improving the production by 30%. But even if we manage to improve the production by 30%, it will never be enough to help the producers that are struggling with very low income. What we need is to improve the income of the producers by multiplying them by 2 or 3 and not improving them by 30%. And so what he said is that we need radical changes. And whoever are at the origin of those changes is the private or the public sector. What we need is significant change, and we are not going in this direction so far, because most of the energy is focused on improving productions or revenues by 30%, which is not enough. Here are some of the initiatives that we analyzed. So you will recognize the European and French organic logo, the rainforest one, the Max Havelaar one, but also Coco Life, the Mondelez corporate program. Forever Chocolate is the Barry Callebaut corporate program, etc. I'm very sorry for this cough. I don't know what's happening. What we got out of this investigation is that fair trade really pioneered into the world of sustainability by setting what is now the standard of a sustainability program. Meaning standard and key point indicators for the sustainability, external audit, a leverage on the price, a higher price on the final product to cover the investment and sustainability. All of that was set by fair trade and then reintroduced in the organic and then in the corporate sustainability programs. But as I said, for organic cocoa, the fair trade cocoa price is still anchored to the conventional price. It's very difficult for most of the fair trade program to go far beyond the conventional international price, which is today more or less $2,000 a ton. And even the biggest fair trade label right now, which is Max Havelaar, raised its price to $2,400 a ton a few years ago. But as you can see, we are not even at 30% price more than the conventional price. We are at 20%. The other problem, especially for the, I don't know how far it goes for the organic cocoa, but I know it happens too, is that all the cocoa that is produced under a fair trade program or an organic program is not sold as fair trade or organic cocoa. Sometimes you cannot find a buyer, and then you have to sell your organic or fair trade cocoa as conventional cocoa and at a conventional price, which is a big problem for some of the cooperatives or the producers if they cannot reach a sufficient amount of their cocoa sold at the organic or fair trade price. As for the organic cocoa, I told about it a lot already, so I'm not repeating myself. What you have to retain is the third point of my presentation, is that the result in terms of conserving the biodiversity are very visible at the farm level, but most of the time it does not translate into the preservation of the whole landscape all around. Meaning you can have a good preservation of biodiversity within your farm, but most of the organic cocoa initiatives outside of Dominican Republic, I will explain later, do not have an impact on the full landscape and deforestation. And what is really interesting in Dominican Republic is that the development of organic cocoa combines with public policies on forest conservation. And I would say the success of conserving forests in Dominican Republic is a combination of the policies at the farm level and the policies at the landscape level, which were taken by the public sector or by some private foundations that had the opportunity to visit. And when you go to Ghana or Côte d'Ivoire, where they try to develop organic cocoa, they really struggle with this aspect that you can have a good policy to produce organic cocoa at the farm level, but without a good national public policy outside and a national approach to preservation of the forest landscape, it's not sufficient to preserve the forest. And now to the, I will pass the Rainforest Alliance, which is not really interesting, I think, for the Dominican context, and go directly to the private corporate sustainability commitments. Main issue is that most of those programs focus on raising up the productivity at the farm level. So as I said before, raising up the productivity not only by 30%, but some of those programs do believe that they can increase the productivity by 50%, especially where you have very old cocoa trees, and when you want to renew those old cocoa trees by using improved varieties. But the truth on the ground in the field is that it is very hard to go beyond 30% productivity rising. There is also a very big contrast because between the ambition of those programs and the reality in the field. Most of the sustainability program of the big brands are focusing on less than 20% of their sourcing producers. And most of their producers do not benefit from their sustainability program, or really few, or really little compared to the ambition. And last but not least, the issue on traceability do not allow to reward the efforts made towards sustainability, because one producers that will invest a lot accept new ways of producing, especially new ways of fermenting, which is a lot of what those brands requires from them. If you want to go toward sustainability, you have to change your fermenting process, which should allow you to sell your cocoa at a better price. But as long as we do not have full traceability, even though you are improving your fermentation process, you cannot get an added value on your better cocoa, because your cocoa is mixed with the cocoa of all the other neighbor producers who did not yet improve their fermentation process. So the quality of your cocoa is not recognized. And I'm speaking mainly for Africa, not for or for Ecuador or for Peru, not for Dominican Republic. So that's a real issue. How do you really value the efforts made by the producers toward sustainability by paying them a better price for their cocoa? These are some of the conclusions and perspectives of our study. Maybe what's very important to retain from that, and I'm not reading it all through, but I can forward my presentation later if you're interested, is that what happened almost every 30 years in the cocoa world since the beginning of the 20th century is that every 30 years the cocoa trees are getting too old, their production is diminishing, and instead of renewing the cocoa trees and renewing the farms, production moves to another country. So every time you have an issue of productivity with farms that are getting too old, the producers do not have enough money to renew their farms, and then the production moves to another area within the same country or another area in another country. And especially we see now that countries like Gabon, like Republic of Congo, like Brazil, are really looking forward to develop their cocoa production. And if we do not pay attention at the preservation of the existing cocoa farms, at the existing cocoa production, if we do not guarantee a proper revenue for the current and the existing cocoa producers, they will be replaced by new cocoa producers, probably in new countries, and there will be new deforestation in Gabon, in Brazil, in Congo, because these are very high forested countries so far. So we raise the attention at IDRI for the decision makers to develop programs to sustain the existing cocoa production and avoid that this existing production is replaced by a new production in new producing countries which are currently home of a natural forest. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I've spoken too much now. So again, the same quote as before, and open to your question.
Gracias de nuevo, Frederic. Creo que tenemos algunos minutitos para unas preguntas. Esta vez todas nuestras preguntas son en español, así que va a ser un poco más fácil. Primero, pregunta más genérica. ¿Usted piensa que casi todo el cacao en República Dominicana es orgánico hasta no tiene certificación?
I'm not sure I get it right.
Simplemente saber si, aunque no todo el cacao dominicano tiene certificación, se puede considerar que son prácticas orgánicas en todo el país.
Well, what I understood is that some of the producers are not interested in the organic certification because that's one of the issues with certification. It is not only changing your practices that cost you money when you shift toward organic, but you have to pay the auditor, you have to pay your participation into a cooperative or an association that will guarantee that your cocoa is organic. So some of the producers do not want to pay to get the organic lab certification, even though their practices are already organic. And that's probably the reason why Dominican Republic got so quickly the leader into the production of organic cocoa production, is because the production was already organic, in fact, on the field. The practices were already compatible with the organic label. So it was only a matter of entering the certification process. And some of the producers, for any reason, did not want to pay to enter into this certification process.
Entendido. Tenemos otra pregunta sobre las prácticas a nivel de las parcelas. En el caso de agricultura orgánica o de la adopción de prácticas agrícolas mejoradas, la persona quiere saber si el cambio de prácticas es suficiente para alcanzar los objetivos de aumento de rendimientos.
Okay, so I did not get the last part in Spanish, so if you can translate the question, would be easier for me.
The question is about whether the change to organic agriculture or improved agricultural practices is enough to reach the objectives in terms of yields, increase.
As a matter of fact, no. That's one of the paradox of those programs. If you are honest in your shift toward organic production, it may be that your yield decrease. Most of the time, organic production, organic farming is less producive than conventional farming, or let's say chemical farming. So that's why you sell your product a better price, because most of the time you have to accept a diminishing in your yields. But now we see sustainability programs that claim that they can both be more sustainable, better for the soil, better for the trees, and more productive, which is highly questionable, because we know in agronomy that higher yields comes with a price. So this price is either that you get some manure from outside, or that you put more work into your farm, or that you change your genetic material. So it's feasible to have a higher yield with more organic practices, but moving towards sustainable practices is not a guarantee that you will improve your yields, and most of the time it's even the contrary.
Entendido. Y para terminar, porque ya está tiempo de cerrar, una pregunta para quizás preparar las fiestas navideñas para los que quieren comprar chocolate. ¿Cuál sería tu recomendación de marca o de label de certificación de chocolate que podemos comprar para tener el mayor impacto positivo posible sobre la cadena de valor?
Well, my first advice is always to go to a small chocolate maker. If you really love chocolate, go to someone that makes some bean to bar, as we speak before. Sometimes that someone that really manages the full chain of custody and who have a special relationship with the cocoa producers and few intermediaries, which allows to pay a good price to the producer. And if you cannot do that, there are some good fair trade labels with high standards, such as I don't know how that can translate, but in French we say symbole des producteurs paysans. I think but some of the fair trade labels are very good. What you need to verify is that you know exactly where your cocoa comes from, because some of the labels, they will put the story of a cocoa cooperative on their packages. But if you look closely, this is not where your cocoa actually comes from. It's just a nice story written at the back of your package. But make sure that the chocolate you buy, you know where it comes from, and that's already a good guarantee.
De acuerdo. Nada, vamos a cerrar. Quizás simplemente antes de despedirse, les confirmo que la presentación, los slides, van a ser disponibles en la página web del IDRI dentro de muy poco tiempo, solamente el momento de ponerlo todo en línea. Le comparto enseguida el enlace de esta página web. Y cualquier pregunta adicional nos pueden contactar por correo. Muchísimas gracias a todos nuevamente por su participación y que pasen un feliz resto del día.